For close to 9 years now, Sicily Kariuki has been an influential figure within President Uhuru Kenyatta's administration. Starting off as a Principal Secretary for Agriculture at the onset of devolution, she was later, in a surprise move, elevated to the position of Cabinet Secretary, becoming the first PS to do so. She was brought in to resolve a graft-riddled National Youth Service. In an extensive interview in our first episode of Inside Uhuru's Cabinet, CS Kariuki spoke to Sam Gituku about her experiences, including her departure from the Health Ministry at a time the COVID-19 crisis was hitting the country.
Waziri, not many Kenyans have been lucky to serve in positions that you have as Principal Secretary and later as Cabinet Secretary. Maybe you can talk to us about that transition from Tea Board of Kenya now serving as PS.
You know, interesting you ask, because the Tea Board of Kenya is a parastatal under the Ministry of Agriculture. And therefore, when I rejoined government in the capacity of a CEO of Tea Board of Kenya, I knew full well that I was coming in into the public sector. And therefore, when President Uhuru Kenyatta took over in 2013, determined to professionalize the public sector. Anybody who viewed themselves as qualified to be a Principal Secretary was called to make an application to be considered as a Principal Secretary. And so for me, it seemed to have been a very natural progression. I put in my application. It was a long waiting period. I went through the interviews by PSC. I went through vetting by Parliament. In between was a nomination by President Uhuru Kenyatta. I must say, I mean, it came as a surprise because the long list was really very long. You're talking about 2,700 Kenyans. And, you know, for you then to be able to move to be to be one of the 26 who finally joined President Uhuru Kenyatta's administration was not one of those things you take for granted.
And here you are, you landed at the Ministry of Agriculture. This is a docket that in the few previous years, it had been riddled in a lot of graft allegations, whether it's the maize scandals or what may have been. And now you have to steer a ministry that is not just with that baggage, but also getting into the devolved system. What was it like for you?
Well, the devolution platform was quite interesting and exciting because there wasn't a template, you know, that had been figured out. You recall, we had only earned Katiba 2010 3 years before then, and so we were learning and doing at the same time. The then Transition Authority became one of my best friends because we managed to strike a chord and reach an agreement of how to do the transitioning. And the governors became also my very good friends because we needed to agree, compare notes, consort, and move forward. And so I was at the forefront then, supported by my then minister, to be able to come up with what was documented as one of the best modalities of devolving sector from the center to the counties. And I must say, it gave me quite some adrenaline, you know, while doing it, because it's never been done before in the history of Kenya. And therefore, it came out a successful template.
At that time, you were working with CS Felix Koski?
CS Felix Koski was my minister then.
And barely 2 years later, then a scandal hit the Devolution Ministry, and we saw the resignation of the current governor of Kirinyaga, and it was you who was picked to go and head a ministry so wide and so much responsibility, again with so much baggage. Why you?
I really don't know why me, because it also came as a surprise, 26 of us, and I was privileged and again very honored to be promoted to cabinet. This is a space where you don't make an application. Now, the promotion to cabinet, which happened on 24th November of the year 2015, came to me as a surprise like it did to other Kenyans.
I'm just interested in that particular day, 24th. Where were you and who called you to deliver the news?
24th was a Thursday. I do recall that I then sat on the board of ICRAF, and I was up in Gigiri having a board meeting. And I received a call and I was told you're needed out and don't go out of town. You know, the boss may wish to have a discussion with you. And therefore, you know, you quickly begin thinking, what has gone wrong? I mean, have you, you know, done something that is not right, or, you know, what is this? And the rest is history, because the rest of the afternoon I couldn't work. I mean, I was just anxious because what's happening here? And we didn't have the conversation as I had expected or as I had been prepared. And in the evening, then there was a news of the cabinet reshuffle. Like every other Kenyan, I was watching and listening and still dealing with my anxiety, not knowing who to share with. It is normally, of course, very confidential. You are not telling nobody that you've been told, you know, stay around. And when the news came, and you know, it just got me by surprise.
You learned on TV?
The verbal conversation was on TV as the boss was reading, you know, his new cabinet. But the entire afternoon I knew something was going to be happening. As to whether something was get off or get in or move forward, I didn't know.
Is that how the president works? He loves surprises?
I don't know. I mean, the president is as human as you and I are. And sometimes when you're in some of these political spaces, I think the template belongs to you.
Right.
Yes, the template belongs to you.
Just to be clear, the Devolution Ministry, I think, was split at that time into public service, gender and youth affairs, yes. And then another one was left as Devolution, right?
Yes, indeed, that is what happened. And my colleague C.S. Kunjuri was handed over the Devolution segment.
And I remember that time there had been the NYS 1, but still NYS 2 happened. What is it that you were not able to do to avoid repeat of such scandals, yet you had been recruited specifically to deal with what was going on in that sector?
Allow me to speak to you and Kenyans and say that whatever has been dubbed at NYS 2 remains an allegation, because nobody has actually been taken through a process of, being charged. Let me put it that way. Now, when I came in, and forever be grateful, I found a team at the top which required to be reorganized because of the alleged NYS 1. And I was given the liberty to identify the team that I would be working with, move others to spaces where if there had been any implication of the initial allegations, then you didn't feel very comfortable working with the same team. So I did quite some major reorganization around the top leadership team. We also did employ systems, including IT systems, to be able to monitor what would be happening. And as far as I'm concerned, we did a job that it required to be done with a lot of sweat, with a lot of pain, with a lot of commitment, with a new team, including the then PS who was assigned to work with me. And so, as far as I'm concerned, this still remains an allegation that is yet to be proved. Okay. And once it is proven, then somebody can trace back and say what really happened. Right. Yes.
And I think former PS Lilian Omolo should be in court, and some few former bosses within the National Youth Service are still in court. And then come 5th of January 2018, and the president in State House read a few names of who was going to be in his cabinet. I'm not sure I had your name.
No, my name actually wasn't there. You're very right. Again, it was a Friday. It happened at about 4 o'clock. I can remember. I was on leave. I was enjoying my first January 1 week, being home. And I hadn't traveled because that is just about the time everybody was anxiously waiting and looking to see, am I in, am I out? And therefore, we all listened.
What did you think?
To tell you the truth, it didn't bother me. To tell you the truth, it didn't bother me. For the simple reason, the formula went as follows. If I recall, there were about 5 or 6 of my male colleagues. It wasn't even a quarter of the cabinet. And therefore, a voice in me said, it will be all right. I felt the need to clarify, and I placed a call to the head of public, then Dr. Kinyua, and I said, my leave I'm due to resume office on Monday, as you will know, how do you advise I behave? He said, oh, you have your job. Go back to work. I mean, back to work. And so with the head high, I went to work on Monday. I do recall, you know, my technical teams looking at me and saying, you know, I mean, what?
Are you supposed to be here?
What, you know? And I quickly, you know, convened the heads of a department meeting for, you know, for opening the new year, for wishing each other well, but to also tell them, you know what, we have a job to do. And, you know, we have a job to do. I am here. We carry on the programs where we stopped in December, bring them on, bring your home, you know, your work plans, and all systems go. Right. And this continued for 3 weeks. And again, on 26th of January, again, another beautiful Friday like today, you know, a colleague of mine called at about 4 o'clock. I was driving from office. And he said, how are you, Dr. Harry? And I laughed about it. I said, it's wrong number. I mean, I can see you're my colleague. I don't understand. Oh, Dr. Harry, you don't understand. I said, I don't understand. Oh, you're the new CS for health, and, you know. And I laughed, you know, because I hadn't heard it. I said, go on to the news and just pick and yeah, you. Congratulations. I said, okay, thank you. So, again, a surprise like that. And because I was driving, then I got the driver to get, you know, turn on the FM, and yeah, I mean, it was running over and over again. Well, that hit me. That hit me. Now, I wasn't very sure to be more excited than surprised, a little bit not sure. I mean, this is another space that I have never contemplated walking to. The rest is history.
And health docket has not been a smooth one, knowing even the challenges that have come of accusations of impropriety, whether it's the purchasing of the clinics, whether it's the controversies about the managed equipment service, or even the current one on KEMSA. Did you at any one time feel this weight of what people call cartels or the mafia house?
Yes, I did. I mean, nobody should cheat you that when you move to these spaces, particularly when the spotlight has been on some of those spots, it's a very disturbing thing, because you're looking at yourself and saying, I'm only me. You know, you can only do so much. Given that even with the president, he's only able to move the top, the cabinet secretary, the principal secretary, maybe a few directors. The rest of the system remains intact. So again, you're walking into a space where they say, kuna wenyewe, you know, and so appealing to them that things must be done differently requires some real serious consultation and a lot of courage, because you're going to walk on people. You're going to not be liked. And if you're going there to look for being liked, then you are going to the wrong place. But on the other hand, you're also walking onto a very risky space. When I moved into health, I do recall having a conversation with the then ambassador of the US, who paid a courtesy call and said, you know, they had effectively stopped you know, some resources flowing into the ministry because of the allegations. Right. And he came to me and said, because it's you, we're going to look at the template again, and we trust you're going to, you know, to clean the place, and we'll support you, notwithstanding. And that gives you a lot of energy. It means that there are people out there who can tell bad from not bad. And there are people out there who also believe changes can happen.
Yet people still feel that it's one of the ministries that there are people that are pretty connected to very powerful figures. How true is that, or how far-fetched is it?
I may not confirm this, but I'll tell you what happens. The minute you do not wear lenses of knowing where Sam came from and who he associates with, you are at liberty to do your thing. You know, your target is there, and you go for it. That is how I took it, and it really didn't matter. It didn't matter. I didn't have time to invest in finding out who is connected to who. And unfortunately, if I then walked over you, I can only apologize at this point in time. I did what I needed to do. The rule is as follows. I didn't create the law. It is telling us to behave in a certain way. Let's behave in a certain way. It didn't come out very easy, because by the time I left Afia House, I had acquired a name, Thatcher, you know, because that is how it should be. And I didn't mind either, you know, so yeah.
Okay. Margaret Thatcher, you say, the lady of UK.
They said it.
Right. But KEMSA is still a thorn to date. There is a new board that is trying to fix KEMSA. Of course, there has been some injunctions, so delaying what they were doing. But what is so difficult with KEMSA from your understanding? My
understanding then was that a lot of capital in terms of stock was in the hands of KEMSA, and therefore it becomes a sport of interest, so to speak. And what I also recall is that a lot of reasonable investment had been made in making the vehicle more flexible, more efficient, more effective, more customer-centric. A lot of investment had been put. One hopes that even the efforts that are being made now are to bring that institution to that space. And it can happen, and I believe it will happen. I have seen my colleague with reasonable determination to move it to the next stage, and I think that is why you see a bit of this resistance. Right. Yeah.
Are there powerful hands within government or in the political class that have direct influence or weighty influence on KEMSA that you heard of or know of?
I wouldn't say that, I wouldn't say with any level of certainty. Because unless somebody comes to you and introduces themselves and they say I'm X, Y, Z and this and the other, then I can confirm. I didn't interact in that way at all. It is just the way you hear names being thrown all over the place. Names get thrown all over. Mine would get thrown when I become very tough. They even say, look now, she's part of it. Not a single interest had I, except reforming the place and making it function for UHC.
Okay. And then come early 2020 and coronavirus breaks out from China, spreads across the world, and Kenyans are worried, and we see a splash on one of the papers in the country, enemies of the people, faces of CSs, perception that Sicily Kariuki is not doing as much to protect the country. What was that crisis, dealing with it as a health CS?
I think first and foremost, I think you, the media, created that crisis, I must say. There was a mechanism that had been set up immediately. Corona became a threat globally. It was set at cabinet level. Never mind, at that point, I was actually on my way towards the docket which I currently had. I still had the responsibility and duty to be able to coordinate with my colleagues to ask questions of understanding. The initial samples that were picked of persons that were traveling from China would then be sent to South Africa, and I was responsible for that. The initial surveillance team, I was responsible for putting it up. The issues of identifying the institutions that are required to be supported by way of capacity, I was responsible for doing all that within the time that, I was effectively in two spaces at the same time. So as we were consulting and saying with my colleagues in transport, with my colleagues in foreign affairs, and the consultation was, are we now at a point of a lockdown? Do we shut all the international guests coming in, and what is the implication? And what protocols do we follow to communicate? You wake up one morning, we have that in that consultation today, you wake up the following morning and this is the headlines. I read a lot of malice. I read a lot of Kenyans being incited. I read a lot of misunderstanding. I read a lot of panic. I read perhaps a position not being communicated because there was no conclusive position of whether to shut at that point in time or to keep monitoring as we were consulting with WHO. So I read that, and my colleagues then, Foreign Affairs, Transport, we were all there. I can confirm to Kenyans today, there wasn't any lapse whatsoever. And if there had been any lapse or inaction on the part of government, perhaps then would have recorded cases almost immediately thereafter.
Was it, you knew this, Kenyans didn't understand? That's what I'm asking. Do you think you had a challenge in communicating what you knew that the country didn't?
Perhaps, yeah. Perhaps to the ordinary person. Perhaps to the ordinary person. Perhaps what we may have taken long to plan, to plot, to understand, and to react. Yes, perhaps.
Then now you move away from health department. First of all, was it a relief, especially because of the crisis that time, moving to water ministry, water and irrigation?
No, it wasn't a relief in the sense that you may want, because again, you recall the deployment happened on 14th of January. At that point, there was no certainty of the magnitude of corona or COVID or what it meant, really. So for me, it was a movement like any other at that point in time. And obviously, moving from what was viewed to be one of the big four ticket items had different people interpreting it differently. For me, I have learned that change is the only permanent thing in life.
A ministry that heavy on promise, especially if you have to go back to 2013, of how many dams that were to be done, how many irrigation schemes that were to be done, and now just about 7 months to the general election. How do you rate that success?
Sam, you start by, insinuating that the ministry is heavy on commitments and promises, but perhaps not on delivery.
I didn't say that.
I want to happily surprise you by inviting you to look at how we looked as a sector before 2013 and before Jubilee took over, and where we are at now, still with some 8 months to go, 8 months which are going to be quite phenomenal in terms of completing some of the ongoing works. When Jubilee government took over, we were at 52, round figure 52% water coverage. That means for every 10 Kenyans, 5 had access to clean potable water. That is what had been attained by the 3 administrations before. Now, look at this against a population that grew phenomenally in the last 20 years, and that we are able to say we were able to bring in another 20% in terms of water coverage. I'm talking about last financial year statistics. The remainder of the space we have as an administration will be able to do another 10% to bring the water coverage to 80% overally. And when I say overally, I'm looking at the national average. Look at irrigation. Irrigation, the targets, very ambitious targets that had been set were to open up 1.2 million acres by the time Jubilee comes to an end. We came in at a point of 300,000 acres roundabout. We are at above 600,000 acres opened up as I speak to you now. Again, it's doubled. If you look at it against target, then you see, yes, there is a gap that needs to be closed. But you look at it against cumulative achievement from when we came in, I think that I want to commend the teams that have been at it. Given what we've suffered, we've seen consistent drought situations being experienced. We've seen consistent needs, therefore, to redirect resources towards the drought responses, for example, that then negate whatever else that may have been, planned.
I know that you mentioned that. What do you think would be the sustainable solution to providing water to arid and semi-arid areas where you see people suffering, livestock suffering because they cannot access that essential commodity?
We have just developed a sessional paper on water policy management that is addressing the long-term water requirements for the country. And in it, one of the most critical intervention that we must invest in is water harvesting. There's a lot of water that goes to waste whenever it is raining, and it's because of the architecture around water harvesting. And therefore, part of what is articulated in this policy and has been expressed by way of regulations that are implementable is a national water harvesting interventions as mandatory in institutions of a certain size. So that if you see where we are at today, no reason that we should not be harvesting water and directing it. That's one intervention. And we've got to be deliberate. That is at the domestic level, that is at the institutional level, that is at national level. The runoff, when we design our roads, for example, the runoff ought to be redirected for what we call water recharge. And therefore, there is again a conversation between the 2 ministries or the ministries involved in terms of planning. So anytime we do any major infrastructural investment, runoff water must be tapped and it must be redirected to the ground for recharge so that the water aquifers do not run dry. And that's the second intervention. And it's a must. The third intervention is what I keep referring to as citizen responsibility to any public good space. What do I mean? Today, if you go around the informal settlements from where we are today, you'll be able to find car wash set up by either young people in the informal settlement, and they are tapping clean water from the tap to clean vehicles. Not acceptable. Not acceptable. So the citizens themselves must come to realize that water as a resource is not infinite. And therefore they must take care of it, even as we do the other interventions from a government point. And so these are some of the quick thoughts. And
what is the alternative for car wash business?
The car wash business?
Yes, so that they don't use fresh water from the taps.
It is the water either that has been trapped through harvesting, or it is water that has been recycled. Reuse. Because, I mean, you want to drive with a clean car, right? But when you divert water which is meant for domestic use to clean a car, it is obscene. I mean, it is too expensive. All of us, including the Deputy President, report to one boss. The boss is the President.
How often do you consult with the Deputy President?
As and when the President thinks I need to consult.
When is the last time you did?